buenas tardes, amigos. Nosotros en ese bloque, en esa sesión, vamos a tener la alegría de conocer un poco acerca de la historia de algunos de los primeros pioneros que vinieron a este continente. En ese caso vamos a escuchar la historia del señor Emeric Sala. Era de origen romano, vivía en Canadá y que contribuyó al desarrollo de Latinoamérica.
You are many. Many more that I remember last time I was here. Any of you here when I was here in 1945? Were you here? You? How about you? I don't remember you guys. Anyone of you remember these invitations of the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Santiago? Was a talk I gave here. La tierra es un solo país. Sábado 22 de diciembre 1945. And how about these newspapers? I don't even know. Do they even exist anymore? El Mercurio, La Segunda. Do they exist? When I came in 1945, there was only a small community, a local spiritual assembly. There was an American pioneer. There was a French archaeologist, his Irish wife, a Frenchman, 5 Chileans. They wouldn't have convinced me that there would be a temple today here. No way. Back then, there was no talk about the temple. Actually, the idea of South America and the Baha'i faith started circulating in North America in 1937 when Shoghi Effendi gave us the goals of the 7-year plan. I remember that. Back then, the only temple we knew was the one that we were building in North America. I remember we were collecting dinner tickets for 35 cents to collect money for the temple. And even then, with the temple being built in front of our eyes, it seemed like a dream if it ever came true. And about this temple, wasn't even in our dreams. How did we get here? I'll tell you my story. I am Emeric Sala. I was born in 1906 in Dobrovica, a city in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And I grew up during the First World War as a very devoted Hungarian. And I remember the soldiers going to war and I was crying and I told my mom, "Mom, why can I go to fight for my country?" But then the time came, my father put me in a German school because German was the language of Europe back then. So I came soon to learn that actually German is the language to learn, German culture is the culture, and that the literature and the arts are above every other culture existing. And I came to believe that. Soon, our town was annexed to Romania, and I became Romanian, and they put me in a Romanian school. And then I found that the Romanians thought that their culture, their literature, is above all cultures and literatures. And they were willing to die for it. And then I said, I had enough. Enough of this. I felt that the nationalism in Europe was choking me. It was not only about countries, it was about religions. And as a Jew, I could see how in our town, Protestants and Catholics, they hated each other, how they all hated the Jews. And I said, Europe is not for me. I had to leave. But how? Where? America was a dream place for everybody back then in Europe, but the gates to America were closed. Immigration was limited. So my next option would have been Canada. I said, no, Canada way too cold. I said, I'm going to Australia, warm country. But how to get there? I went to Constanza on the Black Sea, and I waited for a boat to come and board on a boat and go to Australia. I worked for jobs, but I wasn't hired by anybody. So somebody suggested to me, he said, why don't you go to Hamburg? Because you know some English. You know, I had started learning English on my own in order to immigrate to the States or to Australia. So I went to Hamburg. I went back home. I packed my luggage. My mom did everything possible to try to keep me. I was 19 years old. But I was willing to go and I was willing to die for it. I left. After a long, hard trip, I got in Hamburg. When I got there, I saw thousands of people waiting at the harbor to get hired. I said, who's going to hire me? But anyway, I went to the harbor, I went to the shipyard, and I met Mr. Kramer, an old sailor. He was limping. And I said, I'm looking for a job. He looked at me. He said, all I could get would be a deckhand on a ship. Deckhand means washing bridge, washing toilets, washing the kitchen. Anyway, I stayed there 3 months, day in, day out, weeks in, weeks out, months in, months out. Nothing happened. I was desperate. I was desperate. I started writing home. I was missing my mom. I was missing my family. I was mostly missing my mom. In every letter, she would tell me, come back, Emeric. You know, her heart was so broken that when I left, she wouldn't come even to the train station to say goodbye. Only my father and my brother Paul had come because she couldn't bear to see me jump on the train. But I said, no, I have to go. I'm decided. This is my luggage. I'm leaving this continent. I went to Mr. Kramer. I accidentally found out the brand of cigarettes he was smoking. I slipped in 12 packets of cigarettes for him. And the next week he called me. He said, Emeric, there is a job for you. Somebody's looking for somebody that speaks English as a deckman. English? He said, I told them you know English, be careful. I was hired on the SC Burutu, a ship bound for Africa. I was going to Africa empty, was collecting peanuts and come back. I was hired for $15 a month, and I jumped on the boat. We started our trip. The trip was very difficult. I was mostly working outside. There is no bed. My bed was without sheets. As I'm traveling, I'm washing every day, day in, day out. I'm washing the bridge, the cold water. I even have any boots. But the cold wasn't the only thing. One day, say, all men on deck, all men on deck. What happened? We had collided with a boat. We had collided with a French boat, and the boat was sinking. In a matter of minutes, the boat sank, and 80 of its men were all dead. 4 of them were saved because they jumped on our boat. The trip continued. Slowly, as I'm washing the deck, I see my feet are getting warmer, getting close to Africa, if the water is warmer. But suddenly, fire, 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 the boat caught on fire. So we had to work 4 hours to get the boat saved. Anyway, after 3.5 months of sailing, we got to Port Harcourt. In Port Harcourt, my plan had changed. I said, I won't go back with this ship. My plan was now to get malaria, get hospitalized, and eventually jump on a boat for Australia. I did everything to get malaria. I went into the bushes, I met indigenous people, I ate with them, I danced with them, everything you can imagine. No malaria. Something else happened though, my passport expired. So I went to the Romanian embassy in Port Harcourt, to the consulate. And since my age was the age of military service, they would have given me a pass only to go to Romania. Forget Australia. But the consul, by mistake, gave me a passport, a 6-month passport. I was in 7th heaven. I jumped on the boat that I hated so much. I went back to Hamburg. Australia was getting farther and farther. I said I'd go anywhere now. I found a ship, was bound to Canada, SS Kergawan. I was hired, and I went to Canada. Canada bound, we knew that the boat would go either to Halifax or to Montreal, depending on the state of the ice of St. Lawrence side. We went to Montreal. In May 1926, almost a year and a half after I had left Romania, I got off board in Montreal. I went and I rented an apartment as far as possible from the harbor. And as I was walking out of the harbor, I was seeing these signs. Attention, deserters will be arrested, prosecuted, and deported. I was decided to do that. I rented this apartment very far from the port, and on May 13, 1926, I decided to abandon ship. I left my luggage in the boat with all my belongings and my passport. And I left a note for my colleagues on the boat, asking them to forgive me for what I'd done, because what I'd done was illegal. But you know, because of this illegal act, I was able to save my mother, my father, my brothers, and my sister. Otherwise, they would have been exterminated in the concentration camps in Germany, which was also an illegal act. I couldn't save any Advias in my family. They all were exterminated, all my cousins. In Montreal, as I'm looking at my apartment, I see I have to look for jobs. I bought the Montreal Star every single day to look for jobs. And I was hired in construction sites, mostly because I was very tall, to dig trenches, to carry materials up the stairs, up the ladders. One day, as I was looking also for places to learn English, I found an ad. Public lecture this Sunday. G Block building, St. Catherine Street. Free admission. I went. I went to learn English. I went there, I was in the hall. I sat and I listened to the presentation given by a very distinguished gentleman. But as I looked around at the people in the room, there were a group of Anglo-Saxon, mostly older gentlemen, some women, and I didn't feel that I belonged to this place. But something attracted me because I heard the words harmony, peace, and I kept going back, actually. So one day, as I went back, the speaker that day was a lady, a very distinguished lady. I was sitting there, watching her, her nobility, her posture. I was mesmerized. And as I was entranced by her, suddenly, a young lady gets up. And the younger lady introduced the speaker. The speaker started talking. And as the speaker was talking, I saw a relationship between these two souls that was unique. The young lady was attracted to this lady. It was a magnet. And as she started speaking, I entered into a new world. I felt that this world of these two ladies was something that I wanted to be part of. I wanted a part of it for myself. But the presentation ended. I still had that feeling that I didn't belong here, and I walked away. But these ladies kept pulling me back. Later I found out that the speaker was May Maxwell. And the young lady was Mary, her young daughter, 17 years old then. I kept going back to these meetings. They attracted me. One day as I'm going back, I see the meetings are closed. There is no lecture for 3 months. But I had picked up the book, and I said, maybe this is a good time to read the book. The book I had picked up was Baha'u'llah in the New Era, Dr. Esselmont. As I read the book, in my room, I was living in a small room. I had a chair, I had a table, I had no wardrobe because I had no clothes. I had a light bulb hanging, and I'm reading this book, and I'm reading it, and I feel that I feel ashamed of myself, reading about the persecutions, the life of Baha'u'llah, these executions, these people giving their lives, these innocent people. I felt guilty of my comfort in this little room. And suddenly I realized I had heard about this when I was in Romania. When I had heard about this in Romania, I was 16 years old. A friend of mine had read that in Palestine, a wise man had died. And at his funerals, there were thousands of people. And that this wise man had preached love, harmony, universal peace, the things I believed. And I told my friend, bring me the clipping of the newspaper. I couldn't find it. Now I knew that this wise man was Abdul Baha. Because in the book it said that it was reported all over the world about the passing of this wise man. He had read this in a German newspaper. How I wished that I could share this book with my friend. But there were no Baha'is in Romania back then. There was a Queen Baha'i Romanian back then. You see, the Queen was reading the book that I read in the same days I was reading it. Marta Roth had given it to her, and they had together decided to translate it into Romanian, and Shoghi Effendi had helped with the funds. Now, this is something you won't find in my memoirs. In 1991, an older gentleman walks in the Baha'i center in Bucharest, knocks at the door, and a young Baha'i opens the door, and this gentleman says to the young Baha'i, he said, listen, I have a friend that's a Baha'i. He became Baha'i in the 1920s. I'm looking for him. Can you help me find him? And this young person says, what is his name? He says, Emeric Sala. And the young man says, Emeric Sala? Emeric Sala passed away a few months ago, and I was at his funerals. So the old man says, see, I have a book from Emeric. He gave it to me in the 1930s. I think it's about the Baha'i faith, and I think you would like to have the book. Baha'u'llah in the New Era, 1934, in Romanian. This is the book. This is my book. I finished the book, I walked back to the lecture hall as a Baha'i this time. And I realized that back then, another young man had declared. His name was Roland Stahl. He had joined the faith around the same time that I had joined the faith. And Roland and Mary and I were very excited because we were the only youth in Montreal. And together we decided to do something about spreading the faith. Somehow we felt that we should study the text, and we started having lectures at the Baha'i Hall. The local assembly helped us, providing books. And as we started working together, we realized that this was the birth of the Baha'i Youth Group of Montreal. We started teaching, and the first person that actually joined this youth group was Rosemary Gillis, Scottish background. Rosemary and her family knew the Maxwells. But Rosemary always thought that Mary was a strange child and never showed any interest in her passions. But one day, as Rosemary is walking off the streetcar and going towards the theater, she noticed the sign in the Baha'i lecture hall. She enters. On that day, Roland was the speaker. I was introducing him. And after Roland gave his presentation, I approached Mary and the new friend, and I was introduced. You see, I was still saluting in the Austro-Hungarian way. When Rosemary saw me, this is from her memoirs, she said, a voice told me, this is the man you are going to marry. And she felt indignated by this thought because she had feelings for another man. And then there is this stranger that doesn't speak English. But she said, I was attracted by the group, by the manners this group had, and by the gentleness of the group. So we went on and we started teaching Rosemary. As we taught Rosemary, we had no experience about enrolling people in the faith. How do we ask Rosemary if she has a certain attraction for the cause? But we had felt that that time had come to give her opportunity. So suddenly Roland comes with an idea. He says, let's throw a coin. So he threw the coin. So Rosemary was approached by Roland, who was shaking all the way. And Roland asked Rosemary whether she wanted to join the faith. And actually, she was surprised what took us so long to ask her if she wants to become a Baha'i. So Rosemary joined the faith. The group was growing. And as a group, we started studying the text, and the Maxwell home became a center in which all our activities are taking place. And May Maxwell was actually the engine behind us. She supported us. She sent us books. She gave us all the counseling we needed. We would also write often to Shoghi Effendi about our activities, and he would write us back. One of the messages of Shoghi Effendi had a special impact on us. It actually determined the mission of our group. And as we read the message, we understood that something was going to happen to us. He would say in the message, I urge them to study profoundly the revealed utterances of Baha'u'llah and the discourses of Abdul Baha, and not to rely unduly on the representation and interpretation of the teachings given by Baha'i speakers and teachers. This galvanized the group. We started teaching in a new way. We started teaching in a direct way about the faith, and our dynamics became remarkable. In these years, 30% of enrollment would come from the youth group of Montreal in all of Canada. May Maxwell continued supporting us. The group was growing, and all members of the group were extraordinary. It became a large group. I remember one of the members of the group was David. David was a British gentleman, an Englishman, an actor. But he was working in Montreal as a driver, I think, back then. So as we are teaching David as an intellectual, very methodically, systematically to the writings, one day, me and Roland are walking in the street with David alongside, and suddenly Mrs. Bowles appeared. She appears, and me and Roland are presenting her David, and she invites him next day to the Maxwell's house to the martyrdom of the Bab. And we said, this is not where we invite a new contact. We were in agony. Me and Roland didn't know what to do. We went back and we were thinking how to avoid disaster. The day came. David was sitting in the room. As soon as Mary stood up to describe the scene of the martyrdom, we saw David's face change. And suddenly, he ran away out of the room. Me and Roland said, it's the end of it. We won't see David anymore. After a week, David called Roland and told him, I was overtaken by strong feelings that I couldn't hold my heart. It was exploding. I had to leave. I want to be a Baha'i. You know, many of you might know David as David Hoffman, who later became a member of the Universal House of Justice on his first election in 1963. The Maxwell House was truly a special place. At the heart of it was Mary Maxwell. Mary had been transformed by her mom, so we soon realized that actually her mom was the engine behind all of this. And slowly, slowly, we realized that as the Maxwell home was the heart of our activity, we were all in the heart of May Maxwell. Myself, one day I received a letter from May. May 10, 1933. Emeric, I cannot go to sleep without writing you this line. Last night I dreamt of you. Or should I say I saw you in the world of reality. So strong, so young, with that strange power around you, which has had so deep an effect upon my life. You were with Rosemary, under a kind of a canopy, beneath a clear blue sky. And she took your hand and said, "Come." And as you arose to go with her, you turned and looked at me. You have both become so rare and beautiful. And oh, so dear to me. May. You know, the prospect of marrying Rosemary was a distant prospect because she had 4 people lined up. And I think her family and her parents would have preferred any of the other 3, not only because of my language or because of my origins, but because I had no funds and I was still an illegal immigrant. Nevertheless, Rosemary and I were married. Many marriages happened in this group. The group grew stronger and stronger. It seemed as the group was unstoppable. But in 1937, something happened to the group. You know, May Maxwell, when she was in Haifa visiting Abdul Baha, one day, as she was leaving the room of the master, she approached the door. The door was being opened to her, and she was stepping out. As she is stepping out, the master, with a very loud voice, he said, "Mrs. Maxwell, one day you will have a very wonderful son." And then the master again, "Mrs. Maxwell, one day you will have a very wonderful son." And then again, the 3rd time the master says, "Mrs. Maxwell, one day you will have a very wonderful son." In 1937, Mary was in Haifa. She was to become Amatul Baha Ruhiya Rabbani. She left the group, but she became the assistant, the secretary, and overall, the lifelong partner of the beloved guardian. The wonderful son was Shoghi Effendi. As for Roland, he also had written Shoghi Effendi that he wanted to go to South America, because the plan that Shoghi Effendi gave us in 1937 was focused on South America, on Latin America. He had given the North American Baha'is the goal to open every territory in Latin America. And many of our group felt that we had to go south. One day, as in 1937, I remember we were driving back from Green Acre, me and Rosemary. Rosemary looks at me and says, "It's Shoghi Effendi's plan. Let's go." We left for Venezuela, and we spent 1 year pioneering in Venezuela. Roland had expressed his wish to go also pioneering, but the Guardian had told him to stay in Canada and open new frontiers. And he was among the first home front pioneers in Canada. But me and Rosemary would see him again. He would see him again one day in a very special place, actually. We met again in the Maxwell home when we were back in Canada for a short time, for a few years, and there was the election of the National Assembly of the Baha'is of Canada. And we had the bounty to serve, Rosemary and I, and Roland, on that assembly. Roland stayed. We left again. It was in 1944 when we went to the centenary celebrations at the temple. Not this temple, another temple. We were standing on the stairs of the temple, and we saw about 2,000 people. And Rosemary said, Emeric, I thought I would have to go to the next world to ever see so many Baha'is in one place. So we decided that we would give a centenary gift to the Guardian. We went on a trip to Latin America, South America. We visited 19 countries, all of the Baha'i communities except Paraguay, because I became ill. On this trip, I was able to give 75 talks, 10 of them on the radios, 45 newspaper articles. We met pioneers. The first soul we met on our trip down was Dorothy Baker. She gave us guidance on the trip. Roland's wish to go down south eventually came true. In 1971, he was able to pioneer to Martinique, and he became a counselor for Central America. We kept going back in South America. Me and Rosemary, our heart was there, but something interrupted our Latin American trips. In 1953, Shoghi Effendi launched his 10-year crusade, and his call for pioneers for Africa touched our hearts. So me and Rosemary left for Africa. We traveled in many countries in South Africa. Eventually we settled, and we thought that South Africa would be our home. Once, when Rosemary was away in April 1963 for the election of the House of Justice, I had a dream. I dreamed an old man came to me lying in bed and told me, go home. Go home. I woke up, I said, home is here. Me and Rosemary never thought that we would leave Africa. But after some consultation, we decided that home was to be Guadalajara in Mexico. So we left for Guadalajara. As we were crossing the Atlantic in 1971, I remembered I had once crossed the Atlantic in 1926 to find a new world. Had I found it?